My gosh, that sounds like it's something out of an action comic book in the future. Well, I think the future's here. Paul, what are we looking at?
Yeah, so this is our purpose-built, fully autonomous, all-electric passenger vehicle. It is entirely built around the human passenger, human rider. So when you look inside, you'll see that there are no traditional driving controls. There's no steering wheel, there's no brake pedal, accelerator pedal, just space for passengers. And we've built this and designed this from the ground up. And the idea behind it really is, from the very beginning, Zoox has thought autonomy represents a sea change in how we can think about mobility. Let's design for a new kind of purpose, a new kind of ride, entirely around the passenger.
I suppose the other thing that really helps us is the electric. The fact that it's electric, you can do things you couldn't do before, right?
That's right. And sustainability is sort of at the core of the mission here. But we've designed this to operate up to 16 hours on a single charge in a dense urban environment so that we can be as efficient and as effective as possible while also not contributing to greenhouse gas emissions or pollutions in the downtown areas that we service.
So I assume that means lower operating costs just in terms of fuel and so forth.
Right, and the idea is also to sort of amortize things over time. So we own and operate the fleet entirely, so you won't be able to buy a Zoox one day, you just would be able to hail a ride. And so we would have a smaller fleet sort of overall, and if you were looking at people who are just selling vehicles direct to consumers, but we would provide these sort of shared passenger rides, greater sort of density, greater mobility within these sort of crowded environments without adding a bunch of vehicles to the street.
So from today's environment, this would compare to, say, one of the rideshare services. How would it compare from a cost perspective?
Our ambition is to be a lower price point, right?
So no specifics.
No specifics at this time we can share, yeah.
But the idea is to open up mobility for more people, I suppose.
That's right. That is one of the core missions of Zoox, is greater access to mobility. And part of that would, of course, be cost.
And so from an accessibility standpoint, when we're talking about that, what about people with special needs?
Yeah, so they're one that's a pretty diverse community, right, of people and sort of diverse needs. And so we've designed a lot of sort of light and sound systems, for instance, to be able to communicate with passengers and other road users effectively. And other kinds of accessibility features that we've designed into the vehicle. But we also understand that this is a long-term sort of project, and we engage with a lot of different accessibility groups to solicit their feedback and input on our designs as we sort of expand over time.
And speaking of time, it sounds like it is kind of a crawl, walk, stand, walk type of...
That's right. You want to, at Zoox, the way we talk about it is safety is foundational, right? And a key, perhaps the key aspect of autonomous technology is that it has to be safe. And so we want to make sure that everything that we put out on the public roads is meeting that criteria. And so it's very much let's validate the technology and then we can deploy it on public roads over time.
So over time, right now, vehicles without steering wheels and so forth need to have special exemptions from NHTSA. Do you foresee you guys doing that in the near future?
Well, so we actually have a different understanding of that. We have, and very exciting, we have self-certified this vehicle to the existing federal motor vehicle safety standards. We did this in June 30th of this past year. A really important milestone for Zoox, but also the industry. It was the first purpose-built, fully autonomous vehicle that was self-certified to the federal motor vehicle safety standards. And that was without any sort of application for exemptions or anything like that.
So this could go on the road right now in any state or certain states?
Well, so exactly. At the federal level, road ready with that self-certification. But at the states, it looks a little different, right? So you think about sort of broadly speaking, states oversee the safe operation of vehicles. And so they have things like licensing, insurance requirements. The way that looks in our industry is permits. Usually, states will have a permit regime. And so while we have self-certified to FMVSS, that's a really important milestone along the journey. But we also have to secure additional state authorizations in order to operate on public roads in those jurisdictions.
And what about the local level?
So generally speaking, local governments do not have regulatory authority. There are some exceptions, but usually that happens at the state level with sort of state level permitting. But for us, cities really are, forgive the pun, where the rubber meets the road, right? And so we make a point to reach out to cities, law enforcement, first responders, community members, well in advance of our operations, so they understand who we are, what we're doing, what our vehicles are when they see them driving around, who to contact, and what to do if they need to interact with the vehicle in some way.
And I want to go back to the regulatory, and this might feed into that. But first, let's talk about share a ride. What does Alan always say? Share a ride, share the road. Alan Kornhauser, of course, is a big proponent of ride sharing in terms of different passengers, taking the same car to reduce vehicle miles traveled or whatever.
That's right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously core to our mission, right? Like, we built this vehicle for ride sharing, and we want this to be filled and to take people out of their individual, single occupant vehicle and reduce congestion. And then from the sort of a regulatory perspective, it kind of varies depending on sort of which state you're in, how the rules around that in particular play out. Just an example, in California, the Public Utilities Commission oversees sort of for-hire transportation services, passenger services, and they have created sort of a two-track system around testing and deployment, and driverless and drivered within that. And in their pilot programs, their testing programs, they actually explicitly prohibit what they call fare splitting, which is two different parties wanting to come together. But you can have multiple people in the same party share the ride, right? So there are some nuances like that, depending on sort of where you are in the permitting or regulatory regime. But broadly speaking, there's a commitment, I think, from industry and regulators too have a lot of interest in seeing congestion reduction. And so the shared feature is, I think, one of interest to everyone.
Well, and since your focus is policy, what advice or suggestions, a takeaway that you have for policymakers? What one thing would you say? Do this, and it'll help facilitate this.
No, I love. Thank you for the question. So I think the main thing is creating pathways, clear pathways to deployment and driverless operations. Right. If there is a clear pathway to getting a vehicle like this on public roads and providing a service to people, to customers in cities, right, then that provides a very clear signal and the path for us to be able to go in and then get to that point and deploy. And there's a lot that goes into investing in a community around mapping, testing, right? If there's having that pathway for driverless operations is crucial.
Well, how do you work with cities then?
Yeah, so we have a mantra that we like to really live by, which is no surprises. And so as I said sort of earlier, we make a point to reach out to city officials, to law enforcement and first responders well in advance of our operations and to let them know sort of who we are, what we're doing, how they can get a hold of us, to provide really important safety critical information to especially first responders on if they have to interact with our vehicle in a routine situation or in an emergency. What do they do? How do they do it? How do they know they're doing it safely? All of that goes in advance of our operations so that really people understand, right, who we are, what we're doing.
And so I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about who's backing you, but perhaps you could talk a little bit about that because I think it's significant.
Yeah, I'll just say, we have a great partnership with Amazon, and they've been very supportive of us and our mission. They share the vision of this passenger mobility service that we seek to provide.
And again, this would be a Dr. Kornhauser question, but it seems like with that relationship, delivering packages in the middle of the night when no one's on the street would be a great opportunity.
So we're very fortunate that Amazon has been very, very supportive, right, of our mission. But and this is what we're going to be doing. This has been our mission from the very beginning. But you can imagine other use cases for the technology, and right, like humans are the most precious cargo. If you can transport them safely, you can transport anything safely.
Excellent. Well, I guess so. It's bottoms first and then boxes later.
That's right. That's right.
Well, Paul, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.